Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conexão Metabooks, Season 2, and this is the last episode of the second season. I will speak in Portuguese for a moment, just to explain to our audience, and then I'll switch back to English. Bem-vindos a todos aqui no Facebook. Estamos ao vivo no Facebook da Metabooks Brasil e do Publish News. É um prazer ter todos vocês aqui com a gente no último episódio do Conexão Metabooks, segunda temporada. Hoje vamos conversar sobre o futuro do livro, ou o futuro do mercado do livro especificamente. Fiquem à vontade para enviar comentários e perguntas aí no chat do Facebook, a gente vai receber aqui e eu vou compartilhar essas questões com os nossos convidados de hoje. E daqui a alguns dias a sessão vai ser feita em inglês e daqui a alguns dias nós publicaremos a versão legendada para quem quiser revisitar, quem quiser rever. Jaime, nosso primeiro participante, bem-vindo. Jaime is watching from Portugal, as a Brazilian living in Portugal, so he's watching from there. Maybe you are quite neighbors, Paulo. So welcome, Ronald, Paulo, and Carlo. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for accepting our invitation. Let me get my notes here. I'll briefly introduce our guests from today, and then I'll let them speak a little bit about themselves. So Paulo is born in Porto and graduated in business management and worked in the publishing sector for 21 years. Paulo is part of the management team of the largest publishing group in Portugal, Grupo Porto, where he is involved in the full scope of the value chain of the book, from publishing to retail, including printing, distribution, and online. Welcome, Paulo. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Ronald Schild is the CEO of MVB, one of the leading providers of digital infrastructure for the book industry since 2006. Those who watch our Conexão Metabooks for some time now already know him, and he has also visited Brazil a few times on book fairs and events. Ronald Schild holds degrees from Strathclyde, UK, Nancy, France, and Saarbrücken, Germany. Thank you. Prior to MVB, worked for Amazon as well in strategy consulting. Thanks for being here, Ronald.
Thanks for having me.
And Carlo Carrenho is a publishing consultant based in Sweden and the head of international business development of Italian digital aggregator StreetLib, probably most known by you as the founder of Publishing News in Brazil and Spain. And some of you have already met him at Reboot Books events, where he is a co-organizer. And his most recently adventure in business is Pop Stories, only digital publishing house in Brazil. Right, Carlo? Welcome and thank you. We can't hear you, Carlo. While he's trying to fix that. So I gave a very short introduction or short bio from Ronald and Paulo. Maybe you could please tell us a little bit about you. How did you develop in this business? Paulo, would you like to start?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I would like to send a special welcome to my fellow members of the panel and for all the audience. Well, I joined publishing in 2000, in the year 2000. I came from consultancy. I was working in a consultancy firm in Portugal, and I moved to publishing to Porto Editora, where I am from for 21 years now. Well, my role has always been in management. I'm part of the management team of Porto Editora. And Porto Editora, as you know, is the largest publishing group in Portugal. We are traditionally a textbook company, so we do school books for schools, for students and teachers. And we are also, from our foundation, specialized in dictionaries. From then on, we diversified our actuation, and now we work in the full scope of the publishing business, from publishing to wholesaling, retailing, online. We have printing, we have multimedia offering, we have book clubs, booksellers. So we are, and I'm mostly involved in publishing, printing, wholesaling, and online.
Thank you, Paulo. Ronald,
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, new
Good.
phones. So just to say, it's a pleasure to be here and repeat everything I said before. Nothing was really important. Go on.
Well, Carlos, since you were talking, do you mind, Ronald?
No, go right ahead, Carlo.
Okay, tell us a little bit about you, Carlo. Maybe a few people here don't know you.
Okay. Yeah, I've been involved in publishing for almost 30 years now. And I started in Brazil, where my home country. I've been a publisher. I work in some distribution companies and everything. And then in 2001, I founded Publish News, which is a trade media. It's a website and a newsletter about the publishing industry. And because of that, I started to really get involved in trying to understand things and to analyze things. Eventually, we moved to Spain a little bit with a partner, so there's Publish News there, and I started learning more about Spain. And then 3 years ago, I actually emigrated to Sweden. So that was a big change in my life. But for publishing, it was fun because it's kind of the place to be nowadays because of all the subscription and audiobooks things that are happening here. And then, of course, I'm making my professional life and my personal life more European. So more recently, I'm working for StreetLib, which is a digital aggregator based in Italy, but with global actions and global ambitions. And because, you can never get rid of Brazil, I just got an opportunity, and with my partner, Silvia Rebelo, we're starting it's a digital publisher in Brazil, but it's very focused on audio this week, called Pop Stories. So to make a summary, that's it. I won't talk about Russia and other crazy places I've been involved to. So basically, I like to be everywhere at the same time.
Ronald, tell us about you.
Yeah, first of all, welcome to everyone. Thanks for watching us. I've been in digital business for well over 20 years. I did some strategy consulting, but then I joined the dark side of publishing, i.e. Amazon, and built some new programs for Amazon before joining MVB. When I joined MVB, it was mainly a physical company. So we did trade magazines, consumer magazines. We were a service provider for booksellers, so sold them wrapping paper and other things. But MEB had a purely digital business as well, which is a books and print database. That was it started in the 70s as a printed catalog, and then was transformed before my time, I have to say. I would like to point out. But then it was transformed first on CD-ROM and then a database, but it was not using its potential. And we used VLB, that's the name of the books and print database, to build many other services around digital infrastructure for the book trade. So now we're running books and print databases in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, in Brazil, in Spanish-speaking Latin America. We do ordering platforms between booksellers and publishers. We do that in the German-speaking area and in North America. We have marketing platforms for publishers to market their new releases. And we're currently working on discovery tools to allow consumers to find the right book. And we're probably going to talk about later during this talk about this.
Great. Thank you all. We have lots of experience to share here, I believe, today. And I would like to start our conversation about business model in the book market. We recently saw an increasing on book clubs here in Brazil. It's something that it's more and more strong way of selling books. During the pandemic, especially, publishers' direct sales increased a lot here as well. This was something that was a trend before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, this increased more and more and faster. And the other thing that everyone is talking lately, and I think Carlo is in the middle of the hurricane of that, is subscription models. I've heard he has already told me that they have subscription for coffee shops. I love that. I would like to have that here in Brazil as well, but not yet. But anyway, these are different. These are new models. How is it happening? How are these models developing in your country? Are you seeing book clubs increasing their direct sales, subscription? What do you see happening right now in your region? Who starts?
I might start. Portugal is largely a very traditional market. So we had, regarding, for instance, book clubs, we had a strong tradition in book clubs because we have, since the 70s, a book club from Bertelsmann in Portugal. And as you know, Bertelsmann was founded on the basis of a book club that then expanded Der Club, the club in German, that later on expanded to France, Spain, Portugal, and so many other countries. So the traditional book club that existed from Bertelsmann and expanded throughout Europe created how to say, a pre-concept about book clubs. So book clubs are now considered in Portugal as a thing from our parents. And it's a mistake. It's a perception mistake, but it's true. They were very strong because they were very efficient and they promoted culture during a moment in the Portuguese history where we are coming out of the dictatorship, and people were very badly educated, and they needed to get access to culture and to books. And so they got an incredible start in Portugal, from 0 to 300,000 associates, members, in just a few years, 2 or 3 years. And they were very, very successful for decades. But now, in the recent years, in the last decade, they started to lose importance in Portugal, and they are mostly viewed as an old model in Portugal. I know that in Brazil and the United States, several other new forms or formats of book clubs have arisen, but here in Portugal, it's not easy because the idea of a book club is very attached to that image of the 70s. We have, for instance, the largest book club in Portugal that we bought from Bertelsmann in 2010. In 2010, Porto Editora Group bought the assets of Bertelsmann in Portugal when they disinvested from Portugal, and we ran the book club from there. and it unfortunately has been losing members, even though their offer is fantastic. The kind of the collections, because Portugal always had a special place in the book clubs. Most of the book clubs in Europe were partnerships between the book club and the publishers. In Portugal, that was also the case, but the Portuguese book clubs dedicated themselves to do collections of history, art, and so on. And they were very, very well succeeded in Portugal, and they got a lot of audience. So this is a concept that I think in the Portuguese market is unfortunately marked with a aging view that is not deserved, but it's the truth. Direct sales. Then I will say that pandemic has a role in direct sales. Obviously, we are a small country. We publish a lot. In Portugal, we publish more than 10,000 new titles a year. And obviously, when you have an event like the pandemic and the retail is forced to close down by the lockdown imposed by the government, we have several problems for the publishers, namely putting their books out to the market and also getting some cash flow, because as we know, the novelties are very important in terms of cash flow. So this created a push from the publishers to sell directly to the customers, creating their own web shops and trying to sell directly. And this is creating some tension between the booksellers, mostly the smallest booksellers, and the publishers. But I think it's natural, and it derives from the pandemic and all these limitations that were imposed by the sanitary problem that we had to face. And we must now see what happens if there is a structural change in the way that publishers relate with customers or not, if everything will go back to as it used to be. So I don't know, but it's hard because publishers don't have, unfortunately, like for instance, fashion. In retail, most of the advisors, the consultants say that you should integrate the value chain from publishing to retailing. And this is obvious because you can control all the scope of the chain and make the adjustments needed to eliminate all those, when you lose money, when you all through the inefficiencies, from the value chain, because when publishers relate with wholesalers and then relate with retailers, there are a lot of inefficiencies that cost money. And if you owned all the chain and only your products will go through that chain, as it is in fashion, for instance, with Zara, Inditex, Group Inditex, it will be very efficient and will probably get a very good result. But in books, this is almost impossible. We have, as I told you, a book selling operation online and physical, but we sell all the books we are a general retailer, so we sell all the books. It's almost impossible for me, the view of selling only Porta Editora books on those shops, because the client has to have an assortment, the possibility of choosing between the different offerings of the different publishers and authors, obviously, and this will be kind of strange. Subscription models, there is no subscription models yet in Portugal, but I think that Carlo will be the best one to talk about them. But so I will pass the floor to anyone.
That sounds like a business opportunity for you, Carlo. Should I continue?
Yeah.
So With book clubs, it's more or less the same as with as Paulo just told you. After the Bertelsmann Book Club closed down, it was probably 2010 or 11. That was the last real book club with some relevant reach. And it's not very popular in Germany either. So my last personal experience with the book club was when I was aged 15 and still living with my parents. But since then, there's no personal contact with any book club in any form. There are some learned societies that publish books. They sell it to their members on a subscription basis. And there are some small outlets doing that, but it's very, very limited, and it's it's very much a niche market. Which is, I mean, it does have some cultural implications, as Paulo pointed out, and I share these views because Bertelsmann supplied a large part of the population with literature, with non-fiction, and just simply got them in touch with books. But that doesn't exist anymore, more or less. So we don't have book clubs to speak of. We do have direct sales, actually quite a bit of direct sales. So our official statistics say that some 17% of all book sales are direct publishers to consumers. But it's usually, well, it's not happening in trade. So there is no Penguin Random House selling a book to a reader. It's mainly again, niche business. Like, for example, a legal publisher selling directly to corporations or to lawyers, or a scientific publisher selling to universities. But in trade, it usually doesn't happen, and there's a strong pushback every time, even exceptionally, a publisher starts selling around booksellers directly to the consumer. So that number of 17% direct sales is more or less stable, and we don't see any inclination of larger trade publishers, fiction or non-fiction, to go direct to consumers. And even the pandemic hasn't changed that at all. Well, the only move we saw, obviously, was like shifting from physical sales to online sales, but all the online sales were done by booksellers, either online booksellers or brick and mortar booksellers with a web shop. Subscription models, there is a number of subscription models in Germany, but to my knowledge, none is really successful. There was a huge outcry in the market when Penguin Random House and Holzbrink, the two large German trade publishing houses, joined up a couple of years ago. Must have been like 7-8 years ago, to form Scooby, which is a subscription service for ebooks. But even that service, powered by the two largest publishing groups, hasn't really taken off. It was sold afterwards, and traction was really, really limited. There is Kindle Unlimited, but you usually don't find any bestsellers, new releases on there, except self-publishers, of course. They use Kindle Unlimited to promote their books. But again, that's very much a niche market. Usually all the new releases, the big bestsellers, are sold traditionally either as a book or as an ebook. Mainly as a book, because the share of ebooks in Germany is still at around 5-6%, so it's very low. And I don't see any sign on that changing. But having said that, that was before Carlo joined his new employer, and he's probably going to rock the German market. That's my guess, at least. But what we do say, instead of subscription models, is libraries lending ebooks. That's a big thing, and that's increasing tremendously. There are legal battles, because libraries have a legal right to be supplied with physical books, and they want to have the same right with ebooks. but libraries and publishers can't agree on terms and conditions. So the prevailing model in Germany is that a library buys one copy of an ebook and can lend it once at a time. So person A wants to have an ebook, person A can get that ebook, but person B wants the same ebook. Person B has to wait until person A returned the ebook. So it's very, I mean, it's not very progressive that model, but it's still being used. And ebook lending in libraries is growing. It's causing publishers a lot of concern.
Okay, it's up to me now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of things there, but let me start with the book clubs. I don't hear much about book clubs in Sweden. They are there, and I think they're going down also, but they're not really relevant here. But I believe, and please, Paulo, correct me if I'm wrong, that the traditional Bertelsmann book clubs are a little bit different than the book clubs you have in Brazil now. Because in Brazil now, you have a full curation. So you don't have an option. You get one book per month. And then they make it in such a way that you feel like member of this VIP group of people through marketing, through a series of activities. Also, they make it extremely lucrative because imagine a publishing house that publishes only one book per month and sells 30,000 or 50,000 copies, guaranteed. So I think it's a kind of coming back, but in a different way. And sometimes I wonder, and I even discuss with people from book clubs in Brazil, if that could not work in Europe eventually. I don't know, but perhaps it needs another name.
If I can interrupt just a minute,
please.
That's the only example that I knew was TAG in Brazil, because I obviously don't know the whole scope of the market, but I was very interested in the concept. The concept is slightly different from the traditional book club. In theoretical terms, you can call it a negative option book club, because you get what is offered at the month and you cannot choose anything else from the book club. And this is very hard to work in a country like Portugal. I can imagine that it works in Brazil, because Brazil has large parts of its territory where people don't have access to books and to culture. And I think that there is also a lot of offers from outside of Brazil, authors that are not known in Brazil. For instance, I saw some examples from some Portuguese authors like Walter Ugumem and José Luís Peixoto that were used. And the curation makes this, goes outside, chooses books, very good books from very good authors, and then offers it to a readership that is eager to read something with quality, and that doesn't have the ability to choose the books that they want to read. With such a large market as 210 million inhabitants, it's kind of easy to do it. But in 10 million inhabitants like Portugal has, it's very hard.
Absolutely. That's
I studied the model from TAG. I think it's interesting. I would do it in a developing country where people want to start to read and to develop themselves, but it's hard nowadays, for instance, to apply it in Portugal. I have serious doubts that it will work in Portugal.
Yeah, no, I agree. The size makes a difference there. But it's those kids from southern Brazil, they really found a way to do different things. I think, I'm not so sure, but I think most of the readership are people with access to nice bookstores, but they just saw this idea that that's very cool to be part of this, and you have a special edition. And so it's lots of marketing branding, and they really put huge efforts in creating a community. They even go to events. Some people met. It's almost like AA meetings. Yeah, and like they meet every month, like as if you are an alcoholic and need to recover. It's because maybe they'll found a religion someday.
The true club.
The tag, there'll be a church, tag church. Maybe they'll get to that point. But that's my only comment on book clubs. On subscription, yes. I live now in the country of subscription. You can buy a coffee subscription for 15 euros, and you can drink as much coffee as you want at the Swedish Starbucks, as long as it's 1 per hour. Now you have a subscription to wash your car, which is quite interesting because, you know, no one likes washing the car. So people won't abuse the system. Okay, now I'm going to wash the car every 2 hours. No, because it's a pain in the ass to wash the car. But anyway, it's an interesting model. And basically here, what really works, it's audio subscription. So when you talk about the digital market in Sweden, you need to understand that more than 90% of the digital sales are ebooks, and more than 90% of the model is subscription. To a point that when I worked for Word Publishing, Word Audio Publishing, honestly, we didn't care about the price of the books. And when I went there and I started uploading books to other platforms like Google and Apple, we had to actually create the prices for the books. The books had no prices. No one cared because it's more than 90, it's 95% was all subscription. Am I saying it's going to happen to the whole world? I don't think so. Not in the same level. To think that what happens in Sweden is going to happen in the rest of the world is not true. You can start with masks, that the rest of the world uses masks today and no one uses masks in Sweden. So I think things here are very different. But I think Sweden is a good lab of what can happen and what is a little bit ahead, perhaps. So I think all publishers should keep an eye on what's going on here, just try to see what are the consequences. So last year, helped by COVID, but it honestly just followed the trend. More books were consumed in digital format, audiobooks basically, than print format in Sweden. So actually the digital was bigger than the physical, and most of that is audiobooks in the subscription platform. So that's a little bit shocking. The market still grew. It grew almost 9% last year. The digital subscription grew like 25% last year. And what happened, now I can talk about direct sales. It's just like Germany. I didn't see any change on that, but of course, online retail went up hugely, and physical bookstores lost sales a lot. But basically, this subscription fever is what's really taking the market here. The publishers, they have mixed feelings about it. So they are really concerned to protect the book chain, to make sure everyone is paid enough. So there are talks about that, but at the same time, they experiment a lot. They are not saying, okay, I don't know if it's going to work, so I'm not going to do it. It's more like, I don't know if it's going to work, but let's try and let's see what happens. And then there is something that's very important here. And I'm going to relate that to what you said, Paulo, about you said that's impossible to control the whole chain. And for instance, for Bertrand, booksellers only sell Porto books and try to control the whole thing without the rest of the catalogs. Well, that's exactly what's going on in the audio and the digital world today. So people are trying that. So if you go, I give several examples. Poland has 14,000 audiobooks. 7,000 of these audiobooks are under exclusivity locks with Storytel, NPIC, or whatever. Italy, basically the whole best-selling list is locked at Storytel or Audible. So, and I don't think that's going to work because, we are not going to if you don't subscribe to 3 or 4 movie platforms, you're not going to do that for books. But let's go back to Sweden again. You have 2 major groups here: Bonnier, who has a smaller audiobook platform called BookBeat, and then you have Norstedts that was acquired by the platform by Storytel. 2 years, and they always distribute each other's content. A year ago, maybe a little bit more, because with COVID, I lost track of time. I think BookBeat said, Bonnier said, I'm not going to provide the new releases to Storytel anymore. It was a problem for a few months, but they got together and somehow they made a deal. So today in Sweden, the whole catalog goes to all the other platforms, except what is called like original content, when not a publisher, but Storytel themselves create a very original thing. Then, of course, it's more protected. But basically, you have this freedom of content everywhere. If you compare to Norway, where you have two platforms in similar conditions, no one can get the books on each other's platforms. And now the writers are so pissed. They have gone to the newspapers. They are threatening to sue the companies because they want their books to be in all the platforms. So subscription is growing a lot, but these exclusivity deals, I see it as a big risk for the whole platform, for the whole concept. And it's interesting that the same way you cannot do that in physical books, I think in the long term, you cannot do that in digital books either.
Thank you, Carlo. It's a very complete view. I want to go back to Ronald and ask one specific question. You said that subscription is not a thing in Germany. It's really small. And the question is, not even for audiobooks, or how is the audiobook market in Germany?
Oh, that is completely different.
Okay,
that's a very good question. The audiobook market is still dominated by Audible. They control some probably 85-90% of the market. Audible doesn't offer a pure play subscription service, but you pay a monthly subscription of around 10 or 15 euros a month, and then you get credits. And usually it works that by a standard subscription you can buy, you have enough credits to get one book per month. So that's the predominant model. But the music streaming services, Spotify and others, they're going heavily for the audiobook market. So they're adding more and more audiobooks, and that is tricky for publishers, because traditionally the royalties that come from music streamings are very low. But if you structure your book right, you have maybe 1,000 chapters, and if a person listens to the whole book, the publisher gets a 1,000 times the royalties. So that's a bit tricky. It hasn't really taken off, but I think it will take off.
Yeah, if you allow just a comment there. Spotify just hired one of the main executives from Audible, Sean McManus, and they just made a deal with Storytel. By the way, the two offices in Stockholm are only 1 kilometer apart, so it is obvious those companies eventually are going to actually merge, or Spotify will buy Storytel. This is like, for me, it's a no-brainer. But they made a deal that you can listen to your audiobook content from Storytel at Spotify. This deal has no financial implications, has nothing, but made the Storytel stock, the stock market in Stockholm, go up. I think got to be 18% in a day. In such a boring market as the Stockholm stock market, 18% a day. And to be honest, I had a few stocks of Storytel, and was just checking the numbers of that. It's like, what's wrong? Something's wrong with these numbers. Then I went up.
It's good, not wrong. Good.
Yeah, it was good, but it was like, what? And so just commenting, and in Germany, the music platforms are actually more into audiobooks than any country in the world. You can rarely find any audiobooks from other languages starting now, but German you can. So I think these platforms, these are also are gonna start playing very hard in that field, or they'll just buy someone.
Can I pose a question also?
Of course.
I've been reading about subscription models, and I've seen that in music, for instance, there are now movements starting that are confronting the platforms with an unfair distribution of royalties. Because, as you know, the subscription model has the catch of the subscription model is consuming more and more and paying the same price. So a low price and a lot of consumption. So heavy readers, for instance, in audiobooks or in ebooks, will take the best out of the subscription models. But obviously, when you read a lot, you consume a lot of content, and you consume a lot of effort from the authors and the publishers. And the way that most of the platforms split the revenues is a bit unfair, because the platform receives always 50% of the revenue, and the rest of the 50% are divided by the content providers, this meaning publishers and authors. And if you consume more, you divide those 50% of the content for more and more publishers and authors, so the numbers will be very, very small. As we know, in music, this, even though is a problem, can be useful, because we hear a lot of the same music when we got into a songwriter or an album or something. But in books, this doesn't happen. So what's your catch on this? How can we balance the business model in order for it to be fair for the content creators?
That's
Paulo,
for me.
this was my question. I was going to ask this question.
Sorry.
No, I'm joking.
Honestly, maybe you can't. I think it is still experiment. The whole thing is still very experimental.
Because it's not becoming cheaper to create content.
Absolutely, but what is happening? So today you can't say if there's going to be cannibalization or not yet. There's not enough time, not enough data.
Yeah.
So some people come to Sweden and say, oh, the digital compensated the loss in physical. See, no cannibalization. Well, the guy who's a very intelligent economist called Eric Viberi, who does the research, told myself, Carlo, I can tell you yet. You don't know. And he points out something that's even more interesting. He says, those companies are still not completely established. So Storytel is being profitable in the Nordics, but it's still losing money worldwide. And going back to the stock market, the Storytel stock has been very low recently, and there are discussions on the financial press about maybe they're not going to deliver what they are supposed to. So maybe it's impossible. I don't know yet. So far, what has been happening, though, is that these platforms are reaching in the Nordics, but I think even more in other countries, lots of non-readers. So this is not a lie. So in Spain, half of the Storytel subscribers didn't buy a book for several months and stuff like that. So far, while you are growing more in the non-readers than in the readers. But eventually, going to stop growing. In Sweden, has 10 million people, and they calculate that 1 million families already have an audiobook subscription. So that's why Storytel is going everywhere, because if they stay here. So your question is perfect. What happens when you reach a certain level? So maybe the all-you-can-eat platform is impossible to solve mathematically. But I think the discussion, exactly like your question, is about how much money you pay. What I see about the publishers is lots of publishers saying, no, all you can eat, that's it. Not this model. They say, well, let's discuss how much money you get. If you can get all you can eat, if you find a magic formula that you're going to make more, maybe it's interesting, So, but I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think the future is going to have some limitations somehow. Storytel in Finland already has another subscription price if you limit yourself, and BookBeat did that as well. At the same time, Audible in Spain is out now. You can eat, different than Germany and in Italy as well. So I think everyone is experimenting and trying to find this model. But I think the right attitude is like the Swedish one, that, okay, let's try this, let's discuss, let's keep talking, and let's try to find someone instead of just, okay, no, I can do it. Because the rest of the entertainment industry is being a lot more daring in those kinds of models and platforms. So you need to be careful, not with Amazon, but you need to be careful with Spotify, with Netflix, and all these guys eating up all the time that people has for entertainment. So that's my view, but I don't know. I don't think anyone can know, and might not work. But so far it's working. Let's try. Let's sign contracts for 2 years. That's the answer. Try sign a contract for 1 or 2 years, and then you see, that's what I feel. But maybe it won't work. I don't know.
For us, there is also another question that's about the size of the market. The economies of scale that you need to run a publishing house here, it's very hard to cope with dividing the business model into 3 formats. 2 on the past years with ebooks, physical ebook, and now with audio. So the investments needed to make the full revenue, if you had 3 formats and the 3 formats are relevant, will jeopardize the economy of scale that you need to get the numbers to make the investment worth it. And for us, the price is the perception of value of books in the heads of people is a very serious issue, and all these subscription models, for instance, for me personally, are very worrisome because they lower the perception value of the books or the content, and make it seems like you can eat all you can, so it's very cheap, it's very easy to get it, and you won't value it as you should because it's intellectual creation, it's the best that comes out of us. So it's hard, and in smaller markets I think it's tricky.
Smaller markets are always tricky. I'm working with an Slovenian publisher now, and that makes Portugal a huge market when you have 2 million people. But okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to add a point here to increase this discussion about revenues, costs, investments. During the pandemic, we saw ebooks and audiobooks growing a lot. Audiobooks was a little bit different, but anyway, audiobook is on a going up curve, and ebooks were very, very strong. Sales went up a lot. As you mentioned, Carlo, in Sweden you have digital formats have sold enough to cover the difference from the physical formats. So do you think that now, with the pandemic and with this change that the pandemic brought, more in some countries, less in others, is the time to start to making some changes, or is now when the market is switching and getting more digital than physical, or the trend is to be more or less the same?
I think the market didn't change one thing. Didn't change anything. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I think it didn't change anything. I think that it was accelerated. So maybe we are 5 years ahead now than it would be without COVID, but I don't see any change in trends. So I don't know if it's the right time or not, but I think it was just a huge acceleration of things that eventually would happen anyway. That's my view.
Ronald, you're too quiet. Make some guess.
No. Just on a side note, I think the production will not be the big issue, because I mean, we talked 10 years ago. We talked a lot about the production cost of ebooks, and now it's just like one product that comes out of the machine and doesn't require a lot of intervention by publishers. And I'm on the jury of a startup competition, and we had our jury session yesterday, and there was one startup, for example, that presented a technology to take a textbook and make an audiobook out of it. It's an automated voice, but it's very high quality, and it costs about like 1,000-page book, costs about 16 euros, 16, to translate into an audiobook. So, and the technology might not be fully applicable, but my guess it's going to be like 2 to 3 years until we have technology to translate everything into audio, and then production cost is negligible.
Sure.
But I think we have to, as an industry, we have to follow the consumer, and the consumer expects us to provide services where she starts reading a book in paper, goes to work in her car. She wants to continue this book on audio, and if she takes the train back home, she might want to read on a reader or a tablet. I think it's very important for the publisher to get that mind change, to be more focused on the consumer and to understand better what the consumer does.
But just to clarify, that's my view also. The issue is that you should provide content to readers or to customers the way that they want to use it. If it is physical, it's physical. If it is an ebook, it's an ebook. If they want to cook while listening to a book or run while listening or driving, in an audiobook, you should do it. The issue is if you have to deliver this to a third party, like a platform for subscription, in order to do so. As you know, Penguin Random House excluded themselves from subscription models recently. And I would guess that my perspective, as I told you, in Portugal, we don't have this kind of subscription models yet, audiobooks. Well, we have Kobo, but it's not relevant yet in the market. In my view, I think it's important for the value chain, the present value chain, to control the way that you do that delivery of the format to the consumer or to the customer, because you want to integrate everything in order to give, even for me, for instance, if I would allow a customer to have access to ebook and to audiobook, if he could change between them at his convenience, reading when he's jogging listening when he's jogging and reading when he's on the sofa at night, it will be fantastic. It's my content, my relation with him, and it will be perfect. But breaking this is kind of strange for me, the concept.
Yeah, that's true, and and I'm not sure if subscription models are really that valuable to consumers when it comes to books compared to music or video, because I mean I can listen to music everywhere, in the car, at home, the whole day. But when I read a book as a subscription, or if I even listen to an audiobook, I need a certain level of attention. There's very little I can do next to it. And that limits the number of books I can listen to or read online and so forth. And so that's the real beauty of subscription doesn't come into play when it comes to books. So I mean, so I personally don't mind if I pay 10 euros a month to Audible, if I get full access to the whole library, or if I get one ebook a month, because I can't listen to much more than one ebook a month, maybe two. But that's more or less a maximum for me, and that's probably the case for most people.
Yeah, but then,
Claudia,
go ahead, Carlo. Then the problem is solved, Ronald. There will be no. If everyone just listens to one book, it's gonna be more balanced. Yeah, and no, I'm just making a joke. But I think all these concerns are valid. But I think you really need to look at the movie industry and see how they sell, because Netflix was never allowed to get any content at a certain point, and then they start producing their own, and now they're winning Oscars. So that's something to keep an eye on too. Yeah. Do we want Storytel to be the Netflix of books? I don't think so either. So again, I think it's about balance and about trying to experiment and see how things goes. One comment, Paulo, on the costs. This is so scary, but the robo recording of audiobooks is getting so good in several languages that the cost is, in very few years, is gonna just go down crazily, because for non-fiction, I don't think people care if it's a robo or not. So it's scary. I listen to that and I go, ah.
But
No,
I
but you
wasn't
mentioned the
talking
cost,
about the
right?
cost of recording. I was talking about adding more cost to a business plan that has already the cost of physical, the cost of ebooks, and now it has the cost of audio for the same revenue. If you will not make the market grow, okay?
Yeah, of course.
Cannibalization, right?
But just, okay, I misunderstood, but that's just a comment because audiobooks are very expensive.
Yeah, I know.
But unfortunately, or fortunately, then I'm very conservative because I don't think I want the robots to be able to mimic. But who am I to?
The robot is very interesting in order to allow you to change between ebooks and audiobooks. You know, you are reading to a point, you stop there, and then you start listening at that point because the platform knows where you stopped and may start reading from there. It's interesting, but the future.
Yeah, but it's there, man.
Well, we are talking about the future here, so
I've seen some stuff. Google is doing some stuff also. It's scary. So,
guys, we already use our hour on this conversation.
Wow. It was so good. We need another session.
We can do that.
Insert the coin. Let's go.
I just asked the first question, and we have comments from our audience here. You guys were talking about the people and the difference between songs and movies. Claudia is wrote here, maybe different types of content will be consumed in different ways. A song lasts 4 minutes. A whole music album can be about an hour. An audiobook on average 7 hours long. So all this makes difference. Warner wrote a note here. Maybe the question is not how the market would be in the future, but the question is how the readers would be in the future.
It's completely right.
Absolutely.
So I think you all mentioned that we need to deliver to the audience or deliver to the readers what they want. Audio, ebook, physical, a movie based on the book, and go ahead,
Ricardo. Yeah, I just let you comment on the person who made the first comment about the attention you give. Claudia, what really scares me is not the format, is not the business model. It's the change of way you are consuming things. We don't have, our attention span now is 5 minutes. And I was moderating a panel once at the University of São Paulo with this, I don't remember his name, it's this German librarian guy who studied what is happening with the long text format. By format, I mean long books, novels, or reading a New Yorker article. At that time, even being the moderator, I didn't think that was that relevant. But now I think completely is. So today, we don't read articles on the newspaper anymore. We read the headlines and just the little thing below it that I don't know the name in English. If you watch Netflix, we don't have patience for movies anymore. Come on, let's confess, we just want the series that we're going to do. I'm now using TikTok, and I love it because my brain, it's like a drug for our brain. So I think the real question that really worries me is what's going to happen to the long texts? Because if people don't want long texts anymore, then all this format, subscription or not, then the book industry is really in trouble. So actually, I think you need to go back a little bit to the literature, to the content itself, what people want. So it really worries me how people, even me, I really don't have patience anymore to anything long. So a book,
if it's a remedy, Carlo, I rarely do that. I have to disagree because I don't think that the long text is in danger. And you just named a very good example. 10 years ago, it was a rule that a movie shouldn't be longer than 90 minutes, 120 minutes max. If it was longer than 120 minutes, it was experimental. And now we watch hours and hours on Netflix. Series can last for 10, 12, 20 hours. or maybe
but they
even
are
more.
constructed in a different way.
But they are constructed in a
You
different way.
engage with them.
I agree,
it's
but it might change literature. It's changing literature in Sweden. The writers now, they write for audio. They think in audio already. So we could be killing the next 100 years of solitude because there's so many characters in that book that it's impossible to do that in audio. So, but I agree. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the long text survives, and I hope I start reading more long text, because even being self-critical, I mean, what was the last time I read an article in the New Yorker? Maybe a few years.
But let me tell you something. For me, it's interesting because, at least on my relationships, I see that youngsters are starting to read again later on life, but they are reading heavily. And I think that I heard a lot of people talking about the ability of audiobooks to introduce new consumers to become potential readers, starting by engaging with books in audio format that for them is very natural. For youngsters, it's very natural, and then introducing them to reading a book and getting that resilience needed to go through a book and get the full story, full scope of the story, the imagination that you have, and everything that is amazing about a book. And the audiobook is a very fine way to introduce that generation into reading, I would say.
Great. I hope you're both right, and I hope. Please disagree with me, Ronald, because that's really scary for me.
Don't you think that there is a relation between the education model, or how the education is done nowadays in basic education and etc., and the time, or this problem that Carlo mentioned with big text? Can education help this
I
thing?
think it can, and I think the challenge is a lot bigger than ours as publishers. I mean, and COVID has proved that. I saw this American teacher that every day before opening his Zoom, he would just do some sketchy or make something funny or dance or do a TikTok thing on the video, just so the students could pay a little bit attention. That's just one example, but I think education is still very conservative, hasn't changed much, and they have a huge challenge to modernize and to incorporate all the things they need. But it's a Herculean challenge. I don't want to be in their place right now.
Yeah, that's true. Education is very old-fashioned, very traditional, and it's no motivation to start reading. I know that from experience.
Yeah, I know from experience of my kids.
Yeah, but for us, as publishers, as textbook publisher, I would say that even though education is obviously a little bit traditional, and they haven't incorporated yet all these factors into their habits, they are trying to adapt. And this, at least in Portugal, this issue of the pandemic was very important, because they had to change dramatically into platforms, to Teams, to Google Classroom, to a lot of tools that they didn't use traditionally in the classroom, and they did it, and they succeeded.
Right.
So I think that one thing is, if children are how are they used to consume entertainment time, content or something, and the other thing is, how should we educate them in order to be competent grown-ups? And for me, I think it's important for them to continue to get focus on things, and to continue to be able to go through a spreadsheet or a text during an hour or two, because this is something that we do on a daily basis. And these competencies are very, very important for the grown-ups and professionals that they will be in the future. So I don't know if school should adapt fully to this limited attention span that that youngsters have.
No. I think it should fight it. I completely agree with you. I think it should fight it.
You cannot fight it totally. You have to use it to your advantage and then try to shape it in some way, trying to grow them into the ways that we do.
Yeah.
On our times, we were forced to do it. I don't know if anyone can force a child to do anything nowadays. So they must take them by the hand and convince them to do something, and they lure them into that kind of.
I think our parents say the same thing about us, but I agree with you.
Nowadays, the opposite. It's the child who forced parents to do something.
Sure.
It's not the other way around.
The opposite.
Guys, I'll drop you a last question. And there is one extra question to you, Paulo, specific from our Facebook, and I don't know if you can answer that. So my question is, we are talking about different models, business models, and we almost didn't mention booksellers or bookstores talking about all these models. So I don't want to freak out the booksellers here. I want you to give your opinion on, well, booksellers' role on these new models, or will it be these models plus booksellers and plus whatever we don't know is going to come in the future? So how do we place booksellers on these conversations? And for you specific, Paulo, Claudia is asking, what are Porto's plans for audiobooks?
Okay. Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead. You are the
It's
bookseller.
a question of age, because we run the oldest running bookshop in the world, Livreiros Bertrand. So,
Exactly.
So answering to Claudia in the short notice, we are looking into audiobooks. We are already planning to produce our first audiobooks to, as Carlos said, experiment with audiobooks. In the market, we don't still have a market in Portugal. We believe that probably the a la carte model will be the model that we will try first, because we will not have such a huge offering in the start, but we are looking into it. We are already working, choosing books, choosing the readers, and we'll have news in short time span. So regarding to booksellers and bookshops, because I don't think that one exists without the other, I personally look at them in such a way that consumers or customers want from retail two things: convenience or experience. And for me, it's obvious that booksellers are facing a lot of competition from different channels, like websites, subscription models, you name it, supermarkets in the past, multi-product shops that are probably more convenient than bookshops, because when you go to a bookshop, you only go there if you want to buy one thing, a book. And but then you have the experience part. So if the issue is not having the thing that I want, the quickest and the less hassle way possible, then if I relate to this product, if I consider that the book has some significant role in my life, then I want to be in a place where I can relate to people like me, and this becomes experience. So what we have been doing in Bertrand is try to raise the experience part of bookselling. You must engage with booksellers you must have a good environment, a good setup on the bookshops. You should have like a really nice lounge for you in the bookshops, because it's about relating to books and relating to people that, as me, like books. So I think the issue is that you have to be aware of where you are. Are you competing on convenience, or are you competing on experience? And I truly believe that if you can provide a really good experience to your customers, they will return when they will need the experience again. And this is the significant part of our lives. I cannot remember the last time that I went to a supermarket to buy soap or something, but I remember the last time that I did something that is emotionally important for me. And I believe that people really like books and they want to relate to other people that love books. So this is the issue for me in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I hope Paulo and all the booksellers in the world find the solution, because I really like the bookstores, but it's a challenge. I live in a very small town here in Sweden now. I moved here in December. There were 2 bookstores, which is 7,000 people. I think it was the highest per capita of number of bookstores per capita. But in 4 months, they're both closing. So and the largest one, the guy put it to sell at this, what do you call those platforms like Mercado Livro you have in Brazil. It's selling it online in something you can just buy anything. So I think it's a big challenge, and I think the bookstores will have to reinvent themselves. I think what you said about experience, it's great, might be the solution. You have a good example at Porto with the Lelo, which is all about experience.
Yep.
So I hope you find a way, but that's a big challenge.
If I can just supplement a little bit, when we bought Bertrand from Bertelsmann, we struggled a lot, because, to tell you the truth, when people entered into the bookshops, no one cared for them. It's like if the customer was a ghost and no one seen them, and they were busy making something on the computer, putting books into shelves, rearranging things, and so on. They were too much occupied in order to pay attention to the customer and relating to the customer. After realizing this, we talked with the booksellers, and we in Bertrand we do gatherings with our booksellers, 4 times a year, and we are talking more than 400 booksellers in our bookshop. So, and I asked them, do you realize how many people buy a book from 100 people that go into our bookshops? But they said, no, we don't. From 100 people that go into our bookshops, only 20 buy a book. And this is incredible. They buy it because they want to buy it. They enter into a bookshop because they need a book. So they are looking for convenience. They are trying to find the better way they can, a book. Because you don't help them. You don't give a shit to the customer. And if you change this attention, do you find it's very hard to sell, instead of 22 books for each 100 customers that came into the bookstore? And they said, no, 10% more. It's easy. It's just 2 more books. Why don't you do it then? Do you know how much these 2 extra books represent on our revenue? It's 10% more. If you sell 20 books, if you sold 22, it's more 10%. And this is the answer to the problems. And they started doing it. And we created a script that they must follow, and they are evaluated by their attention to the client. And we changed the company. The company was losing money, and now the company is winning money. And this is because they are doing what they should be doing for a long time. That's addressing the client, attending the client. And if you do it, people will say, it was fantastic. People will go out of the store and they will take a picture and post it on Facebook or Instagram. Fantastic experience, nice bookseller. It was a really nice talk about books. And it works. It's emotional, but it works. It's the way people want to meet with people, and they want to talk with people, not about soap, but probably about books.
Yeah. Experience is certainly a very, very important factor. But when it comes to new business models, be it book subscription, library sales, I don't think booksellers will play a big part. Don't think they'll play any part. But physical book sales will in future also still be very strong. And I think if you had asked me like 2 years ago, before COVID, I would have said, well, it's going to get really difficult for especially smaller booksellers. We will see consolidation of the market, fewer and fewer booksellers, growing chains. But I learned a lot during COVID, and I think booksellers learned even more, because I learned that customer retention and what you said, being there for the customer and supplying perfect service, actually brought customers back to the bookshops.
Sure.
And they did things. When the shops were closed during the pandemic, they put their books in pharmacies or bakeries to pick them up for the customers. They accepted order via WhatsApp, and before COVID, they didn't even know what WhatsApp was. So they were really inventive, and I think if they continue that way, even after COVID, they can survive through service and the proximity to the reader.
Yeah.
I think that after so many time away from each other, people will look for the opportunity to
Even
meet
more.
to someone.
Yeah.
So there's a chance that there's the
But
opportunity.
we are talking about a process that comes from 2012 in our case, and we'll be ramping up this experience area. I agree. I totally agree. Probably after the pandemic, this will be very important, and the cleavage between convenience and experience will be even greater.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In the middle is where you don't want to be, because you are not convenient and you are not meaningful in terms of experience. Then you are doomed.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Because experience in terms of fashion, luxury, or travel or something is always there. We are always willing to pay for a significant experience, right? Traveling, buying a Prada hand purse or something for women, or for men, Mont Blanc or something. We are always willing to pay for experience, for something that relates, that resonates within us, being luxury or other things. But I think books that have that characteristic, that it's very important. We all believe that books can help us be better persons, and we are willing to, most of us, to invest with them in books in order to become better persons.
Absolutely. My friends, almost an hour and a half talking here. We need to finish our live today. Thank you very much. It was fantastic listening to you. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it a lot. And as I mentioned at the beginning, in a few days, we're going to have this event with subscription. subtitle. Subscription, not subscription. It's for free.
Free subscription.
With subtitles.
Freudian lapse.
And hope to see you again in the next season. On the second half of this year, we're going to have a few other conversations. Thank you, Paulo, for the first time with us.
Ricardo, for having me. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo.
Obrigado.
Thank you, Ronald, very much.
Thank you.
Abraço a todos.
See you.
Bye bye.
Obrigado a todos.